Bill Pito, Alan Hahn, and John Wallace. We're joined by Bob Klapisch. He's the baseball columnist for the Newark Star-Ledger and has covered the game of baseball his entire career. Bob, why is this week make or break in terms of baseball trying to salvage its season?
Well, we are really running out of time because right now we're looking at the possibility of a 48-game schedule, and I think anything less than that makes the season pretty much moot. The problem is that there is very little time to get this done, to negotiate, get a second spring training jammed in, and start by mid-July. No one thinks that the July 4th startup is realistic anymore. So there's the very little negotiating time left. And the other problem is that the hardliners in both camps seem to be in control of these negotiations. The moderates are not being heard. So no progress has been made, literally, in the last 2 weeks, and the clock is ticking.
It's amazing to think about, where we are right now and the times we are right now, and these two sides can't get to a deal because it's always going to be about money. But from the people you've talked to and your experience, you obviously remember in '94 there was no World Series, so we've seen this league shut down at a time where you never thought they would do it. When you think about where they are in their negotiations, are there some owners that actually might think that they'll lose less money by not playing at all?
Oh, absolutely. Those are the small market owners. The drivers here, the ones who really want to get things moving, are the Yankees, the Cubs, the Red Sox, the Dodgers, the ones who stand to gain the most by getting the fans back in the stands if possible, at least putting some product on the field because of their large TV revenue and their networks contracts. The small market owners are the ones who have Rob Manfred's ear, telling them, we cannot yield, we cannot compromise the players, we can't afford to play, and if necessary, we just cancel the season and skip right to 2021. And that's where things stand, is that the small market owners right now have the greatest influence over the commissioner's office.
Now, how do you feel about the baseball players that have historically been known as not the best in shape? You go Babe Ruth, John Kruk, David Wells, those guys are kind of big, but, obviously like offensive linemen, they're in their own type of shape. How do you feel the players are going to be in shape in terms of coming back when the things do get rolling, if they do get rolling?
Well, that's a good question. But if you give me Babe Ruth, I give you Giancarlo Stanton and Aaron Judge. Believe me, man, those guys are specimens. And, so much more attention now is paid to year-long physical fitness. I mean, these guys are beasts, and they train like NFL linemen. I mean, it's a different era. Even from when I started covering the game in the 80s and 90s, the players today are bigger, stronger, more athletic. The development of fast twitch muscles is through the roof. So the only thing I would say is that the players during this pandemic have not had access to the training facilities that they normally would in spring training. They're on their own. But by and large, I think today's athletes, today's ball players are so much better trained. They have better training habits, better nutrition. They have their own personal regimes at home. So they come to spring training in 90% shape, 90% game ready. Spring training will only be 2 or 3 weeks if the deal is made. That's not a lot of time to get from that 90 to 100%. But by and large, Giancarlo Stanton today is the model of fitness as opposed to Babe Ruth 100 years ago.
John Wallace, Bob, just so you know, he's in great shape.
I can tell.
Maybe it's a good time now to actually drill down on where the two sides are. We know, as Alan mentioned, and you talked a little bit about that, the fewer games that are played, the less money the owners are going to lose. But what is it in the negotiations that's going to make the players be okay with returning to play? The prorated aspect of how the owners want to pay them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, if the players got what they wanted, their most recent proposal called for 114 games. So you start around July 4th and you play through October. The regular season ends around Halloween, and then you have the playoffs and World Series in November at a prorated salary. The owners couldn't say no fast enough to that. That was like non-starter, get lost. What the owners want is, if you want, they've said in response, if you want your prorated salary, we'll give you 48 games. And we finish the season in October. The owners want October for the postseason and the World Series. That's where the TV revenue is. That's where it's all windfall from Fox. Now, the response to playing into November, the reason why the owners don't want to go into November is because of the fear of a a second wave of the coronavirus and having to call off the season on November 2nd. It would be a terrible setback to the sport to start and then stop. They really want to get this all done by October. October is the month. Really, the tension here is between the players who want to play the regular season into October, get as many games in to bolster their salaries. The owners want the postseason, a World Series in October, for the TV money.
You know who really, you mentioned how the teams that want to play are the big market teams, and obviously the Yankees are one of them because they had aspirations to win a championship this year. But I imagine another team that probably doesn't mind that this has been taking up everybody's attention would be the Houston Astros. And whenever they do play,
Right.
there won't be fans probably in the stadium to boo them like we all expected. You hate to say anybody comes out a winner in this thing, but in a strange way, did the Astros sort of come out a winner in this no matter what happens?
Yeah, I mean, the more time elapses since last year's World Series, the better for them. The sting sort of diminishes over time. I mean, you saw in spring training, we all saw in spring training how the players are being treated by Florida fans, by retirees, by tourists, with vicious. Can you imagine the Astros going into Yankee Stadium at this point? They were scheduled to come in for a 4-game series in September, which isn't going to happen. But just think of the reception that they were going to get over those 4 days. I mean, how much hatred and bitterness and resentment towards this franchise and everything that they did to baseball over a 3-year period. That's not going to happen. So in large part, the Astros have been spared. They've really caught a break.
Now, we've been relegated to watching Korean baseball, which Major League Baseball should be upset about because they could have owned that whole platform.
Yeah.
But now that the NHL's got their plans in place to come back to play, NBA has their plan in place to come back to play. Do you think that Rob Manfred should reach out to one of those commissioners on how to figure out how to get baseball back to play and figure out whatever their template is to try to copy that?
As you mentioned, the other leagues are getting ready, and the Major League Baseball has given up its chance to be the first sport back. They've had the stage all to themselves, and would have been a marvelous opportunity to generate goodwill for the sport. At a time when this country is just going through all kinds of upheaval, all across the board, baseball could have been first back to say, hey, we're here to rescue the country, at least provide some entertainment. Now, where Rob Manfred goes, I think he'd be better off listening to the moderates in his camp. Believe it or not, the Yankees are moderates, the Dodgers, the ones who say, let's find a way to put this product on the field. Let's compromise. Right now, that's not happening. So Rob Manfred right now is one of those hardliners, and he's 50% responsible for this impasse.
Bob, do you think if things get worked out, they're going to go with the hub location model, or do you think that teams are going to be able to host games in their own stadiums, obviously without fans?
It looks like right now, with the easing of the pandemic, hopefully, fingers crossed, that the hub plan has been tossed aside and everyone's going to get to play at home. And in fact, the state of Texas just recently said that if baseball can come back, they will allow right now up to 50% of fan capacity in their ballparks. So who knows where that's going? And maybe that will influence Manfred and the owners to come back and compromise a little bit, that not the entire season is going to be without ticket revenue. Fingers crossed on that. But the idea is to, one way or another, every team plays its home games at home in their own cities.
So maybe Yankees fans need to buy tickets for Houston and go to Houston home games. But at least you can still boo them.